and
Good
welcome
morning.
to the large virus that is in the background. I feel its presence on me visually.
I know. I think that's what the virus. Where's the spike protein? That's what I want to know.
Um,
I,
exactly. I gotta edit my name here.
or the furin. I don't know. When it gets technical with the virus, I kind of zone
Yeah,
out. I zone
the
out.
spikes and things.
Yeah.
Apparently that is. And you know what's funny? As I was watching, as we do, I was watching a bunch of prior to 220 stuff, and I noticed that not this one, but like if I showed you a picture of it, the main coronavirus visual that we've seen everywhere for the
Sure.
last two
Right.
years, it was literally a CGI thing that was created in like 2016. So, yes, it's
Oh,
still a
interesting.
coronavirus, but I remember when that, and if when we do this again, I'll bring a visual of it and you'll
Yeah.
be like,
Do
oh, that's the one.
do
Yeah.
do.
But it was totally created before,
Wow,
which
that's
is
fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating is one word for it.
Yeah, and it's red, right? It's red, like it's
Yes, yes,
alarming. It has this like sense of urgency to it, right? And people see it and they're like the virus, right?
yeah.
So yeah, from a marketing standpoint, it's fascinating.
Well, so let's introduce ourselves.
Okay,
For
sure.
Yeah, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Jessica Hockett. I am known on Twitter under a pen name, Emma Woodhouse, who is a title character in a Jane Austen novel. Not many people realize that, but I've been tweeting under that name since May 2020. But it's not really a secret what my real name is. I have trolls that use it all the time, so it's
Great.
fine. And I'm reporting from Wheaton, Illinois, which is outside Chicago. I think about 25 miles west or so, in DuPage County. Lived in Evanston, just north of Chicago, where Northwestern is, for 14 years before we moved from there back out to the Wheaton area where we're from.
Nice.
That's me.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, my name is Eric Hartman, obviously. Interested. I had a nom de net at first. I was out on Facebook, like amongst my friends and coworkers, but on Twitter, I created an anonymous account, and as summer rolled along, I realized that only some of us, because I own my own business, right? I don't have an employer. I wasn't worried about getting
Right.
fired, or not losing business, at least at first. So I decided to switch over to my real name. But I live in Westchester, New York, which is, I think, kind of a parallel in a lot of ways to where you are, which is, we are a suburb, a deep blue suburb of a very, very deep blue city. And it's been very frustrating this entire time.
Mhm.
From the very get go, we were banging our heads against the wall with these people that were just, not, thinking outside of the box doesn't even begin to describe it, just embracing this mania. And at first, we were like one of the few local families to push back on this. And it was
Mhm.
very, very lonesome. And, thank goodness, I mean, it's taken way too long, but thank goodness there's been a lot of local families that have come on board. Lots of DMs saying, gee, you were right back in,
Right.
late spring 2020. Sorry, I called you those names, but I think that you've noticed this too, and I've heard you talk about it. But the good thing is well, the bad thing is it's taken them so long. The good thing though is that most people, once they sort of take the red pill and see what's going on, they tend not to go back, right? And so what we've had here in like our Facebook groups is this slow tsunami of honestly fed up people that are seeing through the bullshit in one fashion or another.
Sure. Yeah. And we are legit coming up on 2 years
Yes.
to slow the spread, right? And so it's almost too perfect from a marketing standpoint. Like we started with 2 weeks to slow the spread from 2 weeks to 2 years, right? Like that should be, that'll be a future book that's going to be written. But I think you're right. I think there has been lately like more of a shift with people waking up. I think the booster, when they're like, okay, now everybody who needs a booster or who's qualified to get a booster, and then people are like, wait a minute, and then looking and seeing, wait a minute, I went and did what I thought was the right thing or the necessary thing for me medically. I got the vaccine, but things haven't changed, right? Right.
Yeah.
Like we're not seeing in a lot of parts of the country, including where you and I, the kinds of places you and I live, we're not seeing people move toward sanity. In some ways, we're seeing people double and triple down and get more panicked, right? And whatever you think about the vaccine or its efficacy or whether everybody should get it, I think it's fair to say that we didn't really expect that this is where we would be over a year after vaccine availability. Don't you think that's true?
I think it's absolutely true. And, I saw there were quite a few that were shaken loose when the vaccine mandates came around, and then they put the mask mandates back in place. And a lot of people that willingly either took the one J&J or the stratified two of the other two, there were quite a few people that were like, WTF, like, why, like, wait, I shouldn't have to wear a mask, like, why am I having to do this?
Right.
And so all of a sudden they're jumping in the pool of doing the research that we've been doing for 2 years, about masks, and they discovered what we discovered, which is, the evidence is non-existent, and and then they do this thing, and they're like, gee, what else are they lying to me about? And boo, down the rabbit hole, and you're like, see ya,
Right.
because they're lying
Well,
about
and
everything.
And you look at college campuses, right? So, I mean, we do have some like, Iowa State University, I think, has basically no restrictions of any kind for students.
Nice.
Or a Hillsdale College is one that
I knew
people
about
talk
them.
about. That's in Michigan, which I'm sure their applications will be at record levels this year, right?
Absolutely.
But then you have these other colleges like University of Illinois is a huge one. Princeton, Cornell, like the Ivy Leagues, who are what, 95 to 98% vaccinated.
These are the creme de la creme of, high-end thought. I mean,
exactly.
And they're so expensive, and it's just an embarrassment.
Yeah, and they're hugely vaccinated. They have some kind of testing program in place, whether it's just for unvaccinated students or vaccinated if you come in close contact, or there's all these rules, but they're more like locked. It seems like they're more locked down than ever, and they're more afraid. So these things, this more testing, calling for more vaccination, these things have led to more freedom. More masking. They've led to more freedom and less COVID nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world. So we need an exit. I mean, the exit ramp was like 10, 15, exit ramps ago, right? A long time ago. But what do you think? What do you think the exit ramp is? I mean, now we're seeing Joe Biden today there's a press conference that reportedly is going to signal some kind of shift. But that shift includes these free tests for every American four free tests for everybody who goes to this website and orders them.
The USPS.
Go ahead.
It's the USPS website, and the glee in my hood on my local socials about the USPS handling this was weird. Like the verve with which these people really want the federal government to actually work and do one thing that is effective or sees to fruition is really insane.
So are you going to order your tests? Like, are you going to go to this website and order the tests? Or what's your thinking on that? Like,
I may do it and test random things around the house to see if
like
I can
orange,
get any. Yeah,
orange,
that's what they did in Africa. Yeah,
sure,
they totally did that. I don't like wasting money. I don't. I've become I was fairly fiscally conservative before all this, but we've
Same.
spent gazillions of trillions of dollars, and it's just all. I have no idea how we're going to come back from this, and so from a spending level, like I hate that they're doing this. It is
Right.
so
Right.
after the fact. Even though I know that tests don't help. They're super loose. They cause way more problems. The fact that they're sending out these tests and they're going to arrive after the Omicron wave has already crashed is just
Hmm.
typical of these idiots. And the fact that everybody's sort of going, yay, your post office, it worked. I was able to get on the website and I put in my thing and they're going to send it to me. Yay. It's just like, damning with faint praise. It's like
Right.
the government
Right.
is a gigantic, you know, um, lobotomy. It's like,
Right.
good for you. You went pee pee.
Right.
I like.
Well, and none of this is free, right? So I love when it's like free N95 masks. That's another thing that the Biden administration is announcing today, right? Like 400 million masks that you can go get one or two or I don't know
I
how
don't.
many, but
Yeah.
at your local pharmacy, and they're pitching all these things as free. But let's be honest, like these things come back to the taxpayer, right? It's not free. It's we the
Our
people
our
that
our, our
is paying
grandchildren
for
and great
this.
grandchildren at this point. But
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I mean, if I play the part for a second of somebody who really believes in equity, right? Like you and I are both lived in these kind of communities for a long time where it's like equity and we have to do all these things for people in need, which I agree with in principle, right?
Sure.
But
We all
like
do.
do I go and like if there are people, and maybe we can talk about that too. What does it mean to need tests? Like why do we need home tests? But let's put that aside for a second.
Good
Like if
question.
somebody who does care about equity and people in need, like should I, as somebody who can walk into a store and buy my own test, somebody who does have health insurance and does have a doctor, etc., should I go and log onto this website and take 4 tests for myself, or do I take them and then give them to someone in need? Like will there be a community donation centers where
That's
you
a
can go and bring your tests? Like do you see what I'm
that's a good
saying?
point.
Even from
I
that
do.
perspective,
Well,
how
especially
should
from that
this work?
perspective. Yeah, because
Right.
obviously there are people who are forced to test, right, in order to go to
Sure.
work, or if their kids are quarantined, they need to show a test. So that might be a good point, which is to go ahead and get them, order them, and then sort of you can use your discretion to either
Hmm.
donate them to the village and let them distribute, or
Sure.
maybe what we would do is post on our local Facebook like, hey, we have extra tests if anybody wants them.
Right. Right.
That's a
But
good point.
why? But
I won't
but
do that with the masks though. I won't do that with the
no.
N95s.
No. I want to let those collect at Walgreens and just sit there, right? Um, with the test too, we have been hearing this. I mean, I hear it from my governor all the time. Have for these whatever we're on now 22 months or so. We need tests. We need more tests. But what do we really need? Like, what is the need? Is it you need a test to obey or be in compliance with protocols? Like, what if these protocols and requirements went away? Like, would you really need home testing? When I think about what are some other things that we have at home medical tests for, I mean, the main one is pregnancy, right?
But
Right?
that's it.
A pregnancy test. And I think there are other home tests for
Yeah,
other things, but
you could do
pregnancy is
like
the
a.
number one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, but these are traditionally they're sort of RX. They're you can do at home, colon cancer tests, right?
Sure.
But it's like you get a prescription for it, you go pick it up, you do it, and you sort of
Mhm.
hand it in. This idea of testing all the time is really, really insidious and really, really unhelpful. It's funny because I used to travel before 2020. I traveled all the time for
Mhm.
work,
Yeah, me
and
too.
I do like productions and things, and I would often travel with peeps, with my team. And I remember one of my producers, a younger kid. was like reading Sky Mall one time, and he saw this blacklight that you could buy and charge USB, and you could scan your hotel room for,
All the
to see if a
critters.
porno was shot in there before you
Yeah.
came in or whatever. And so he buys this
Cool.
thing, and he gets it. It comes to the office, he's like, hey, but they were checking things. Like, ugh. And so, fast forward, this guy was the most miserable traveler
Sure.
for several trips. I mean, he would go into his hotel room and he would just be like, I can't stay in here. Like, oh my God, I need a new one. He was calling, the housekeeping, and they come in. He was just this nightmare. And finally he had to just stop. He's just like, you know what?
Right.
I don't want to know anymore. Like I was fine before. And, obviously pre-2020, we had this talk about immunity too. We were like, you were probably getting some immunity from sleeping on all that weird
Sure.
stuff,
Sure. Yeah. What a
So
great metaphor that is, though, right? For this like PCR testing, and I think, I mean, the at-home testing is not PCR, right? But didn't the what is his name? Kerry Mulligan. Am I going to
Terry
get that name
Mullis,
right? The Mullis.
Terry
That's right.
Mullis. Yeah,
That the inventor. That there's videos of him talking about the
absolutely.
PCR test, and him saying something to the effect of, this kind of technology that I've developed, like, could be used for basically evil ends. I mean,
Yes,
you can pick up fragments of basically anything in your body and use it to convince people that they're sick. And that's exactly what we've done. Like, I have COVID. Do you have symptoms? Well, no. Right. Well, then what's the problem? I don't know. I don't want to spread it to others. Right. Like, we've created this whole way of thinking about and redefining sickness. And we've moralized
absolutely.
virus transmission in, really, I'm going to use a word I hate now, unprecedented, right? Because the media uses that word all the time now. But it's in unprecedented ways. And it didn't take that long, really, to shift people's thinking. And I think that's what's so scary, right? It didn't, to
It
me
is.
anyway. Like, it really didn't take much or take long to completely change people's thinking about viruses, about safety, about obligations to other people's health,
Yep.
right? I mean, and we've seen it all the way up to the Supreme Court. I love the Sonia Sotomayor and Gorsuch. There's part of me that really loves that dynamic of what's going on, because it's
Agree.
emblematic of
Totally
what's
agree.
going on and the debates in
Did,
larger
did you
society.
did you see the piece from CNN that it was male privilege and
Oh Lord.
the viral equivalent of man spreading, like on the subway, for Gorsuch to do that. And yeah,
That's
it
right. And
super
but why
quick.
does Gorsuch have to pretend he's sick? And why does he have to pretend
Exactly.
he's
I
a
think that was
threat?
my exact tweet, which was, why does somebody who's not sick have to wear a mask that doesn't work to protect somebody who's max vaxxed and boosted
Sure.
and
And
also seemingly unhealthy? I mean, I don't like throwing that out there, but at the same time, it's like, that's on you.
it
Like
is.
if you're not gonna handle your own health as well as you should. Yeah, sometimes there's genetic factors and bad luck or whatever, but like that's you can't force everybody in society to lockstep obey you and kowtow to these other people. It doesn't work that
Mhm.
way. It can't work
Mhm.
that way.
Well, what's interesting too, if I'm not mistaken, Sonia Sotomayor's diabetes is like, she had it in childhood. It was childhood onset. So I bring that up, excuse me,
This
because
is the this
she.
is the coronavirus, by the way,
Oh my
right?
gosh, there it is,
This
right?
is it.
It's so
Sorry,
alarming. It's
I
so
totally
alarming. No,
just
that's
found it. But
okay.
this came
That's
out
okay.
but again, just to wrap it up, this came out well before 2020 as a CGI representation.
Right, and then it became this alarming symbol, right?
It
That we all
it
like we all have to stare at it and look
There was a
at it.
moment, seriously, it was
COVID.
almost like, and I remember when it happened because it was in late January, because I was already doing like little graphical things, and there were a couple visual representations of it, but it was like late January, early February. This one came out, and get this, if you know anything about graphics, it came out and it was alpha, it was isolated in high res. And so, and I deal in media, so it almost came out like a media kit because it, like right here it has a background, but I have like the 8K version of this where every little piece of this is stitched out. And so you can put it on a different background.
That's fascinating.
Right?
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes you wonder. But for a second, back to Sotomayor, she, if her diabetes was childhood onset, like she is used to taking responsibility for her health, right? Like
Or
I
should
was,
be.
my background's in teaching, education, and I can remember years ago having a student, it was the first I've heard of it, who had celiacs. And he might have had diabetes too, now that I think about it. But like this kid, he was awesome. Like he knew what he could have and he couldn't have. He, you know, had to leave class sometimes and, you know, take care of things for himself. And he was ultra responsible. So in a way, I'm really surprised that, you know, somebody like Sonia Sotomayor, who has always understood that, I mean, presumably that she's responsible for herself, I mean, has been totally, I mean, deluded, I think is the word that I would use, into thinking that, you know, other people have to help keep her safe, whatever that means, right? Whatever that means. While she's vaccinated, probably boosted, mask wearing, the
Definitely
onus
boosted.
somehow is still on Justice Gorsuch. I don't understand that, but I do think that a lot of people are still thinking that way. I mean, do you know people who think that way? You don't have to name them, right? You don't have to name and shame them, but do you come across people like that still in your circles, or do you think that's changing?
What do you mean? Just sort of the hyper, like,
Well, right. Like the either like you're responsible for my health, or we all have to do these things. I came across a
oh, of
lady in the
course.
grocery store the other day who was basically yelling at me for not wearing a mask, and you know, started to call the police. I don't know if she went through with that. If she did. It was crazy, but she was like, she had a shield, she had an N95, she had gloves on and everything. And I just said to her, because I don't mind being confrontational, and because she was being confrontational with me, and so I said, wait, are you vaccinated? Which is not something I would ever ask someone.
Sure.
Okay, but she was
Right.
freaking out. So I said, are you vaccinated? She's like, yes. I said, then what are you afraid of? We spreading it to other people. Just,
Yeah.
like, ma'am, you need to
No.
release yourself from the prison of fear you have created.
It's always been this bank shot, you know, virology, right? Which is, so from the very beginning, when everybody was like lockdown, right? And we'll obviously get into this, but I was like, no, I was the only person I knew that was like, don't do this.
Same.
This is And so everybody was like, well, no, we got to lock down because slow the spread, right? And I said, well, why don't you lock down? And he said, no, everybody has to lock down, right? Except for the essential workers, obviously. But the question I asked over and over and over again, I still ask this, and I do not get an answer to this. I've never gotten an answer to this, which is, all right, there, laptop elite, you know, hysterical person. Who magically all of a sudden thinks that they're immunocompromised or some weird shit. Like why don't you stay inside, right? Like, why don't you lock down and wait it out? You can order your DoorDash, you can spray down your Amazon packages, you can Netflix your brain out, you know, for 3 months, 6 months, who cares? You can wait till the vaccines happen. But why do you care if the rest of us are going on about our lives?
Right.
And the closest thing I ever got to an answer was like, well, the spread. And it's like, no, if you are quarantined, right? If you are, you know, locked in with your gloves and, you know, spraying everything down, you have nothing theoretically to worry about, right? So why are you forcing people that don't want to do this to do this? Right. And then it came down to sort of what you were just talking about, which is this societal protection, this community, this unspoken, you know, we're all in it together rule. And it's like, well, hold on a second. Like I didn't ask to be protected by you from myself. Like, how does this work? Right. You know what I mean? And you know, thankfully it was always a very mild virus, and it's even milder now. But again, it's like, I hate to say it, but even if it was worse, like, what the fuck do you care if everybody, you know, all the team reality people go out there and let it rip and die? Like, you know, that's not your call.
Right. Well, I
their,
think it
that's
shows
their
how
call.
successful the propaganda was, right? And if I take us back to that January, February 2020, right, where things were sort of building, and then March 2020 with the shutdown, the 15 days to slow the spread, or whatever your governor or elected officials were saying, you know, it seemed like people were so willing to do it because they were sold on, like, we all have to do, like, we're all in, right? And
Yeah,
Americans, like, we
in it
love a group
together,
effort, right? And
alone together.
right, we love a war, we love a competition, right? And so it's like, okay, we all have to do this. And for those early weeks, even though, like you, I was opposed to it from the very beginning, from just an economic standpoint, or why are some people essential and some people are not essential, or with jobs and industries. And I was opposed to it from the beginning and worried about what it would do to the economy, right? And you and I both live in metro areas, so when you start to think about people, like, okay, people are staying at home now, they're not going downtown now,
Right.
there's not people going to
I
restaurants
immediately,
downtown
yeah,
now.
I
I
was
mean,
like,
right
this is a
right
catastrophe.
away. And to be fair, my husband's in the hospitality industry, right? So I was like, oh my gosh. And I
Right.
started thinking about the dominoes. But in the beginning, there was all this energy around it.
Yes.
And it's not like they said we're going to lock down for a year. It was the 2 weeks, now 2 more weeks, now 2 more weeks. And all these Broadway stars, like, wasn't Lin-Manuel Miranda doing like these videos, and Andrew Lloyd Webber, God love him, like, was releasing his full-scale musicals on YouTube so that you could watch them at home.
The nurse TikTok
The
dance
nurses
videos
on TikTok, which that was deadly. We can get to that later or some other
yeah.
time. But it was like this, all in this together. And so from a propaganda, like public health propaganda standpoint, it from a persuasion standpoint, it was really successful, right? Like, it really changed the way people think.
Well,
really.
And it was funny because they had this little hashtag campaign that was very short-lived, but I think it was protect the protectors or something. It was something about using the community energy on a local level to locate elderly people or at-risk people and help them, take them their groceries and check in on them, again, from a distanced or whatever thing. And I actually remember thinking, like, okay, well, that's voluntary. That's okay, right? Like, we know, and this goes back to the fact that we knew very early on what the stratification of the ages and the demographics were from Italy. And so that idea,
from the Diamond Princess cruise ship.
Dude, don't even, we could do let's do a whole episode on the Diamond
Princess.
Princess.
Whole thing on the Diamond Princess, yeah.
Totally. But back to your question, yeah, I do still see people who are really freaking petrified. And unfortunately, some of those people are my kids' teachers. My kids talk about how, they each have like 2 or 3 teachers who are, surgical, N95, surgical mask, goggles, faceplate, gloves in the classroom. And
do you think it's fear? Do you think it's legit fear? Do you think it's like sense of like duty? I mean, I guess there's a lot of things caught up in it.
You said
right?
Duty, and I do think it's a bunch of shit.
Right.
So,
well, I do too.
Kids.
I'm saying it's like this. I have to do this. I have to protect the children. And like at this point, 2 years in,
yes,
it's really it's sunk cost fallacy. And there's probably some other terms for it as well. But sunk cost is like, I've invested so much in this, financially, psychologically, emotionally.
Psychologically, definitely.
So it has to be true.
Yes.
It can't possibly not have been worth it. Or what does that mean about myself? What does that mean? Right? Like, it's too dissonant. So people don't want to let it go.
Yeah. No. Again, I think it's a righteousness. It is a sort of a cult-like, righteousness and belief that, all of this voodoo, right, that they've been doing, that there is some efficacy there. And, the Swiss cheese chart is, probably the most damaging cartoon of our lifetime, which is this weird math where it's like, all right, if I do this and this and this and this and this and this, that, magically, exponentially, I'm safe. Right. And it's, and they start there. And then when you start going, well, this doesn't fucking work, and this sucks, and they're like, well, you can't take that away. It's all part of
Right.
the
It's
toolbox.
superstitious. It's
It is.
superstitious, isn't
That's
it?
why I call it voodoo.
Well, yeah, and in
No offense
Illinois,
to voodoo.
it's too much to explain right now, but there's a school mask case that's being adjudicated, and God willing, tomorrow the judge may issue a TRO that will apply to at least 145 kids in 145 school districts. So it's interesting because you're seeing some of the school districts like scramble a bit, right? Kind of like we're seeing in Northern Virginia, and they're like, okay, what do we do? So I spoke with somebody who's involved, who's on one of these school boards, who's definitely team reality, and this person said, okay, now my other board members are recognizing that, this TRO might, be enforceable and might take effect. So, I have other board members saying, all right, so what do we do with the unmasked kids? Like, okay, we'll have to make sure that they stay 6 feet away from other kids. I'm like, oh, like it's a superstition.
They're
right?
still doing
Because
that
somehow
here.
my daughter's going to have to be, if she's unmasked, she has to stay away from other kids. But when they walk outside the school and those friends come to our house,
Right.
like it's not, voodoo
It's
superstition.
none
like
of it
that's what it
makes
is.
any sense. It's the same thing as the restaurants, and what's so frustrating is that, we keep pointing these things out. Like we went into so they have a mask mandate in our county, and we'll go into this later. But like our governor was stripped when it was Cuomo. He was stripped of his emergency powers to a large degree. They didn't go as far as they should have, but the legislature did, to their credit, go in and yank a bunch of his emergency powers, which, by the way, are unconstitutional anyway. But
Right.
we'll get into that.
And our legislature has not done that. So you guys have done more than we have. So
well, yeah, it's a race to the bottom. But so in November, Hochul, who replaced Cuomo, announced emergency again, and that's when she closed elective surgeries again, to brace for Omicron, even after we knew already by 2 weeks that South Africa was like, what are you doing? This is super mild. And also, interestingly, the hospitals, they completely ignored the emergency ban on elective surgery. So that goes to show you how much teeth these things really have. And nobody's done anything, right? People are getting their knees replaced, and all this built up elective surgery. But what she did was she put in this a couple weeks later in mid-December, she put in this statewide mask mandate. And she tied it to vaccination status, essentially saying that you had to either show a Vax Pass and be up to date, whatever that means these days, or you had to wear a mask. And of course, outside of New York City, and even New York City can't do it, businesses aren't set up to play, health Stasi, they don't have the apps and not everybody has that stuff. And so the default is for all these businesses to just say, all right, everybody has to come in and wear a mask, because the health departments were threatening these businesses with very high fines. And they also were encouraging this snitch network, which that really eats away at me. Like this idea that they're, deputizing, citizens to snitch on each other with this stuff. But anyway, my point is that our county actually decided to go along with this, right? And it's odd because we try and actually go outside of our county, because the county north of us and the county west of us said, go stuff it, right? We're not going to do this. We're not going to enforce this. And so we try and go there as much as possible. But the reason, my point is that when we do grab bites to eat around here, there's been a little bit of a network that's popped up among parents in our groups where it's like, this restaurant's cool, this restaurant's not cool, and so
it's like prohibition era, right? Like where to go and where to stay away from. Does New York City proper keep out 5-year-olds who aren't vaccinated, or is that a Chicago thing? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, they just started doing that. And Broadway, that's a big thing that our Broadway friends have been tweeting about and whatnot. But so we went into a restaurant on Sunday night in our county. It's like the first time we've done it. It's a good restaurant. And we went in and we were the only people without masks, and nobody asked us anything. And we walked to our table and sat down. and I noticed that we were getting we got a couple dirty looks from one of the other tables. And again, it was a table where they were
right. They were masked while they were
seated,
masking
between bites,
right?
and it's just
With
like, all right,
two, oh my gosh,
you're freaking insane, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, and I don't even care, you know.
No, I know, I really don't, right? Like that's I want choice, right? So you do you.
But
right.
but the point is, the restaurants, again, this is this cognitive dissonance that guy who was masking between bites just didn't understand, because you know, as soon as you take that mask off between your bites, it's done. It's done. You know, it's like if that restaurant was a so-called super spreader event, it already was. You know, It wasn't me. Right. You know, who knows who it was? But as soon as it's like, you know.
Right. Well, and I mean, I maybe talked to you about this before, but one of the first things that I did, funny enough, because this is just the kind of person I am, in March 2020 was I started reading books about other epidemics and other pandemics, right? Like just to get context.
Of course,
so,
I did too.
Right, like the first book I read was on the London plague of 1665, 1666, which killed 25% of the city. I mean, it was just crazy. So
sounds like Omicron.
Yeah, doesn't it? So I was getting some context, but one thing I noticed, or one pattern that I saw in these different epidemics that I read about, is we're always wrong. Like human beings are always wrong about how it's spreading. Like at the time, true. In the moment, like we're never right. I do.
I think even now, I think we have a decent idea of maybe. Right, but there's something about it that we don't know.
I think bathrooms play a bigger role than people are willing to admit, but that's okay. That's maybe right. We'll see. But we're just always wrong, and I don't understand. And this speaks to our hubris, right? But
I'm okay with that, by the way.
Right? Yeah. Oh, me too. Me too. But it speaks to our hubris of we think we can control things that we can't control. We think we're so advanced now. We think we get it. And it's like, there's nothing new under the sun. Like all of these things I feel like shouting, we're doing it wrong. We're doing it. We're doing it
I have
wrong.
Shouted that.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think
nobody's heard me.
Do you think we're coming toward like an end of some kind? Like, do you think?
I do. And so that's a good pivot, because actually I have a couple things I wanted to share and have you comment on. Okay. And so I'll do this first. Okay.
We can return to Plan A in England and allow Plan B regulations to expire.
Wait, could you hear that?
Of course. Yeah. I saw the whole clip this morning on Twitter.
No, but was it just playing the audio now?
Yeah, it said it's only the Plan A, Plan B part.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, so Boris did that, and which it was big news this morning, right? We all were tweeting about it. The UK has just thrown out all of their mitigations, all of their
no more mandatory masking.
No more mandatory masking. No more work from home rules. No more reduced occupancy stuff. They had backed off the masks last week. And here's another video I'll play. So
I can't unsee that. I can't
unsee that. That is some dancing. But it was interesting because immediately a lot of people went to like, well, he was compromised, right? Like, the videos came out and I got to be honest, I don't care. Yeah. Like there could be a video of him having sex with a chicken, and if that gets somebody to reduce these restrictions, then go for it.
So do you think that was the catalyst? You think? I haven't followed necessarily everything in the UK.
Yeah, I mean,
when did that video come out last week?
It's been, well, we've known for a while. I think that there's been emails, and then that video came out, I think, like last week or the week before. And there's been a lot of pressure. I think if you remember back to spring 2000, he was originally Team Reality. Like he did not want to lock London down, and the Imperial College guys got to him. So, but we shared this news immediately with our local leadership and our schools. Again, it won't do anything, but it's like, I, did they just kill all their kids? No,
No.
they didn't. And at a certain point, and this goes back to your very first question, it's like, where's the off ramp? And I think the off ramp is wherever it is for you, right? Which is unfortunate because it's not just you and me. It's, we're a gazillion people, right? And so it's just this slow wave to the majority. And then I actually have thought for a while we were already in the majority. And then it's like people like this, like Boris, have to get the message. And, they had the Gallup poll came out yesterday for the Democrats. They've gone from generic ballot +9 in January of this last year to, I think, 13 down. I might be exaggerating. I don't have the figures with me, but it's been a huge shift. And there's a reason why Biden's giving this speech today. And there's a reason why the rumors about it that you've heard are probably likely true. There's a huge rift between the White House and the public health establishment. And, just like Trump couldn't untrot Fauci out, Biden can't either. There's too many MSNBC viewers that have their Fauci candles, and they will not hear of it. So that's, in my opinion, a big reason why we're in the pickle we're in. We can't quit you, Corona.
Right. People love the pandemic, right? Like there are people that, and you know what? A lot of those people, the pandemic, and I've confronted people I know about this, like you haven't lost that much. You haven't given up that much, right?
Yeah.
Like, and those people have said I mean, they're working from home now. They like it. They never had a salary reduction. They might have a second house, which is fine. I don't care if people have second, third, fourth houses. That's great. But this is working out well for them.
This has been an elitist. This has been from the very get-go. Excuse me. This has been a very elitist function. Right. And I remember I was talking to my wife about this early, and I was like, this is so elitist. And she was like, why are you using that word? And it was like, it was one of these things, I just saw it, sort of cement in my mind very early, just because it was very obvious who was pushing this, and the friends of mine that I was getting in arguments with on, essentially Facebook, they were all very well-off people, like these, like armchair socialists. And I remember it's like, right now, it's all I can do to not post, the supply chain articles and the trucker articles, because this is the exact stuff that I was like, this is going to happen. It might not be tomorrow, but it's going to happen. What you're advocating for has obvious tails to it. And to your point, like your husband works in hospitality, I'm in marketing, and I had my entire life, I've had clients in, restaurants, consumer electronics, beverage, consumer packaged goods, pharma, right? And so I immediately saw like what was going on. I'm like, oh, no, like you can't do this. And they were like, oh, yes, we can.
Right.
And turns out they were right.
Well, and the thing about armchair socialists, or champagne socialists, we sometimes call them, and the Chardonnay Antifa, is they could stay home and feel really good about themselves, right? Like I'm staying home, I'm getting paid, I really care about other people. When I go out,
they care. They
care. They care more than you and I do, because they wear a mask. And so,
they were forcing you to do what they wanted you to do because they care
they care, right? I mean, and this isn't so much where we live now, but where we moved from, the suburb we moved from. I mean, outdoor masking. I mean, that was the norm. We got yelled at by neighbors for not masking outdoors. That's how crazy it was. But it was people who were working from home, and they would go out for their afternoon walk with their mask on, or they would go to the grocery and wear their mask, but they weren't masking 8 hours a day plus, right? They weren't doing any of that. But so the mask in that regard, and this is sort of a tangent, but it's become a symbol of virtue. Right. I mean, it became that a long time ago, but these people who are advocating for it, I mean, there's a lot of doctors who have advocated for it too, but they mask is part of their job, right? Like they're paid well to mask.
I mean, but not
right?
prior to 2020.
Yeah, no, not for hours on end a day, but it was so interesting. The people advocating for these things were not the people who had to be subjected to them whatsoever, but they could feel really good about themselves and good about shaming you because you fought against it.
Yeah. So early on in our little village, they closed off all of the playgrounds with, hazard tape.
Yeah.
And, this was like in the summer, and it was like, what are you doing? And they just, we asked them point blank, like, what are you doing? And they just wouldn't. And this is sort of a thread that we've noticed. I think all of us have noticed, but like our officials, our administrative officials, our bureaucrats, just were like, nope, not hearing any other opinion, not going to talk to you. And there was a very sort of heroic, patina to all this, right? We saw it with the nurse TikTok videos, but it was also with, sort of these middling bureaucrats who were in charge of making these decisions. And then, they would close down the playgrounds and they would block off the basketball hoops and stuff. And it was, just absolutely insane. We actually, there's a little skate park down near us, and we went, and it's totally open. And we go, and this old woman with like 3 masks on came by, and with masks, and she was like, you have to put these on. And I was with my kids, and I'm like, and there was like, these other skateboarders who were like, frankly, they were smoking dope, right? Right. And we were just like, no. And she was like, well, I'm going to call the police. You can't be in here without a mask. And we were like, whose decision is that? And she's like, mine. We're like, and then you're left with like, all right, do we want to get the cops here? And so we left. And,
I know. It's not worth it. I personally tore the tape off of 3 playgrounds in our neighborhood. And then one time they put it back up, like the next day. It was so infuriating, but I mean, it's ludicrous now, and it was ludicrous then to think about, like, really, like, you were keeping kids literally locked up inside. You didn't even want them exercising on the playground, and this was all in the name of health.
And they wouldn't explain it.
Right?
They wouldn't discuss it.
Nope. They wouldn't at all. So I think we're beyond that stage of hysteria. We're beyond that stage. So I feel like we have, like, when I think about it, like
some
this
places,
time last year,
they still have our swings that are middle school tied up, so they can't swing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And
it's better safe than sorry, Jessica. It's better that they don't think that there's any downside to better safe than sorry planning, and there's a lot of downside to it. You can't operate in life like that.
That's why every once in a while on Twitter, you've seen me post this, like, I like kind of try to cut through the crap and say, like, wait, why do we care if kids get COVID? Like, why? Why? And why do we think that we've kept them from getting it with the tens of millions that have already gotten it? Like, somebody tell me this again. But I feel like that's throughout this whole thing, where there's even with Biden today, right? Okay, N95s, tests. Like, okay, this is a solution in search of a problem. Like, what problem are we trying to solve?
That's what they do.
What problem are we trying to solve? And if I spin it positively, so this is my positive spin on today. This is my glass half full. Maybe this
on what you think and what you think is going to happen today.
Well, I know. I mean, there's the free testing that's already been announced. There's the N95 announcement, right? Like 400 million N95s are being distributed to pharmacies. I think CNN was reporting that this morning. But I wonder if this will be like, okay, now they're not going to say this yet, right? They're not going to say, Boris Johnson said, we will trust the judgment of the British people and no longer criminalize anyone who chooses not to wear a mask. Amazing, right? In other words, that we're going to go back to normal thinking and assumptions. But I wonder if this is part of an implicit effort to be like, okay, now we're going to move toward, now you're on your own, right? Like, if you want to wear a mask, get an N95. right? Like, I mean, hopefully they won't mandate them for everyone. That's the other part of this.
I don't.
But
Again, I
maybe
don't
this
think
is
that
a
they can.
self-equipping. Do you know what I think? This is, again, this is the glass
Yeah.
half full. As like, maybe this will help, like satiate or quell the fears of the crazy 10 to 20%, like the people who are truly still petrified, because I don't think that's the majority. I really don't.
I
I
agree
really
with you.
don't.
We're the majority. We're the majority at this point. The problem is that the politicians are a lagging indicator. Like they, it takes a while. But like what we said before is absolutely true, right? The writing's on the wall. The polls are terrible. I'm sorry, but the polls aren't, in my opinion, based on the polling that we've all seen for the last 5-6 years. I don't think these polls are even reflecting how bad it is for the Dems, right? Like I think it's going to be awful. It's even awful here, even though I don't think our blue county is going to go red anytime soon. The Biden administration, say what you want about them, like there's experienced, smart politicos that are involved with that administration. And, if we see it, they have been seeing it, right? Mm-hmm. This is not new news for them. And they are, like we talked about, they're in a pickle. They have the public health establishment, the Fauci's of the world, the teachers unions, the crazies that we're talking about, who are, have been driving policy, but they know that if they keep down this road, it's not only going to be a bloodbath, it's going to be like historic.
Oh, sure. Right. You mean midterms?
Yeah.
Midterms, you mean? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Midterms are coming, and they need to
pivot, do something. But they have this cast of crazies that they have, kowtowed to for this long. And you've seen it, like even when they were starting to, like when Leanna Wen was posting about, the cloth masks, remember? Like we predicted where she was going with that, by the way.
Yeah, right, right.
Yes. In the comments that she was getting from the believers, their heads were exploding, right? And so any movement towards reality on this is fraught for the administration. So I'm very curious to see how they try and handle it. They're not, even though I did say that they have smart, experienced people involved with them, they haven't done a lot right. So I don't even know, armed with this information, I don't have a lot of, your glass is more half full than mine. I think that it's probably going to be more of the same today. And if it's a shift, it's going to be a subtle.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think Biden will still assume that same gloom and doom tone that he has, but just if I think about, not even that this is their intent, but practically speaking, what will the free test to every home, and if you want an N95, go get one, like it will help equip the most panicked, I think. And I do think it's a sign of, we have to live with this. We have to learn to live with this. Like, let's move out of this. I think. I don't think they're going to mandate N95s for everybody.
I don't think they can. I mean, I think that there's legal issue. Well, I think there's legal issues there. I mean, there's a reason why the CDC had recommended against them up until, a week and a half ago on their site. Right. It was literally like, don't do it. Like, these are for professionals. There's all sorts of reasons. We know that kids, not only shouldn't wear them, but it's actually dangerous for kids to wear them. And right now there are millions of parents that are forcing them on their kids. And it's like,
well, one of our colleagues, so to speak, on Twitter, who tweets under Stinson Norwood, he said a few weeks ago, he's like, go ahead, mandate N95s on kids. It'll be so easy to prove the harms. He's like, bring it.
I don't
bring it. I mean, which he's being facetious, but I understand what he's saying. Like, hey, you want to deny that covering kids' faces is, physically, emotionally, psychologically harmful? Great. Put a worse one on.
Totally, I get it. It's just, once
it's not a serious argument.
Twice, like, fool me once. I mean, we were talking about this. I forgot who it was. Was it Stephen Barrel that posted about it? But somebody posted something that they had tweeted, 20 months ago, and it was essentially what you're saying, which is, if you really want to talk about protection, N95s are, the only ones that have any argument for them. So let's either do that or move on.
Right. And so that's why I think this move to distribute N95s in a strange way is kind of about like trying to protect, right? Or give people who are truly still afraid and maybe who are truly still vulnerable something tangible, right? And then the rest of us can just move on.
We'll see.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe
We'll
not.
see. So I wanted to share a couple things. Again, we were just talking about. Let me play this here. Hold on.
At the live desk, a standoff happening right now between Virginia schools and the state's new governor, all over masks in schools. After taking office Saturday, Glenn Youngkin rescinded the state's school mask mandate effective January 24th. Well, right now, a growing number of school districts across the state, including Richmond, Fairfax, and Arlington, are defying the Republican governor, saying that masks will continue to be required. The schools say they're required by law to follow federal guidance that recommends the masks being worn in schools. In statements, some citing the CDC, even the Virginia Department of Health, which both recommend masks in schools. Meantime, Governor Youngkin says parents should be able to make the choice for their children. This new measure would allow the parents to opt out their kids. We'll continue following developments as that effective date approaches.
All right, and here's what Youngkin said about it.
Mask order. Arlington County Public Schools essentially said it was going to ignore the order. Is there anything you're going to do to make that school system comply?
Well, first of all, we wrote the order specifically to give all of the school systems basically 8 days to get ready, to listen to parents. And the fact that that tweet came out from Arlington County within minutes of my executive order, well, what that tells me is they haven't listened to parents yet. And if there's one thing that hopefully everybody heard in November is it is time to listen to parents. So over the course of this week, I hope they will listen to parents, because we will use every resource within the governor's authority to explore what we can do and will do in order to make sure that parents' rights are protected.
There we go. And so this was right here on the heels of this, what the frickin' American Association of Academy of Pediatrics in Virginia released, which is this quasi-medical backing for these school districts to defy the executive order. And so I'll give you my 2 cents, and then I want to get your take on it. But the idea of executive orders bothers me very, very much, because throughout this whole ordeal, so little of this, and I can't even really think of anything that has been voted on by our, legislative process, right? Like, quick civics lesson, like we're a republic, our states are like many countries, essentially, they're supposed to be fairly autonomous and united in the United States by some very, frankly, simple federal rules. The states also have a mechanism where they're supposed to be able to pass laws, and that's how the House and the Senate, or whatever they're called in the states, get together. They write and vote on bills, and the executive branch signs them and then executes them into law. And we saw very early on this abuse of executive powers that were extended well beyond prior precedent. And the idea, in our state, and I know in yours, a lot of this did come down through executive fiat. And part of what bothers me in Virginia is the fact that, and Trump did this too, right? Like, I think we can, it's like both sides are not good at this, but this battle of executive orders is very troubling. And this last thing I'll say, I think it's insane that the progressives here, the lockdowners, these people that want to keep our kids in masks, these crazy people, they are insisting on having it both ways, right? When they had the governorship, they said, executive order, local school boards must obey, right? You have to follow us. And then Youngkin gets in and he says, okay, here's my executive order. And then the local school boards say, nope, we're not doing it. And the AAP and the other, Looney Tunes are like, yeah, they're right. They can do what they want. It's like,
right.
My head's spinning from this, all this unconstitutionality, but.
Yeah, so I knew where you were going to go with this when you were playing the clip of Youngkin, and so I tried to hear, even though I like him, he's definitely the ideological and physical opposite of J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, no question about that.
What are you trying to
However,
say?
I know. However, when I listened to him, I tried to kind of hear Pritzker's voice, right? And say, okay, if this is a statement about something that I disagree with, do I agree with this executive order?
Right.
And the answer really is no, because, and I don't know Virginia's laws on this, even though I went to University of Virginia. I haven't, looked at their education laws lately, or their control, like their school boards, how they're set up. But I can tell you in Illinois, the Illinois school boards, they derive their power from the General Assembly, the legislature, and they're established by the legislature. So local control, I'm always going to fight for local control, even if the local school board decides the craziest thing that I'm completely opposed to.
I think I agree with you.
That's
in general,
that they're accountable to
Yes.
to those
They're supposed
voters, to those voters, right? So I understand, and I haven't read all the text of Youngkin's order, or again seen it in the context of Virginia's laws, but I'm for governors kind of removing an emergency and restoring normal, like, okay, back to normal. Now school boards, the power's back to you. And then and some states have done this, right? Like then the legislature makes a move to ban masking in school, or whatever, require masking in school, whatever the case may be. But we've lost in all these executive orders. And this is true with DeSantis too. Like, just because I agree with him doesn't mean that I agree with the issuing of fiats that, forces the local school board to do something or not do something. And for me, it doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. It's an authority and power and rule of law issue.
Agree.
For
Agree.
me.
Well, here's where I think it might be, and again, this is where we get into where we're not lawyers, but the fact that masks specifically are, again, they're not a victimless crime, right? They are. Before 2020, it would be unheard of to put a kid in a mask. As a matter of fact, we would see the opposite. Some kooky parent sends their kid in a mask to school every day. They'd get a call, from the principal, and they'd be like, this is not healthy for your kid. This is disruptive, right? And so I guess what I'm getting to here is I agree with you totally on local autonomy. I'm a big fan of it in general. I think that was sort of the founding fathers, strategy, right? Which was everything should be local. And I think a lot of our problems in the United States right now is because, most of our stuff has gone federal. But the masks are a little bit different in a way, I think, in that I know that our team Reality has talked about exactly what you brought up, which is like, should they be able to, is it mask optional, or is it banning masks, right? Like that's kind of the discussion. And although I think that mask optional is a viable compromise argument currently, there's something about the fact that it's they're not benign. You know what I mean? Like there are definitive downsides to these things, right? And I think that if they were completely benign, or even if there was a little bit of efficacy, the discussion, at least from my POV, would be a little bit different. But I think it's they're harmful, and I think that to me elevates them to a place where I could see again a state legislature saying, you cannot mandate masks on children in schools, right? You can't mandate it. And again, that goes back to choice, but at the same time, we're in a place where if you don't ban it, then a lot of people are still going to do it. And then you have the problem with private businesses doing it. And you have, again, back to the local control of the schools. They're like, well, thanks for the advice, but, we think we have a surge and we're going to demand everybody wear them. So
Right.
it's a sticky.
Well, it's interesting because my background's in education. I've worked with hundreds of schools across the country and in other countries. And when the mask thing first came down, I was like, oh my gosh, like, are teachers actually going to agree to teach with a covered face and teach a room of covered faces? I mean, I cannot believe it, and I am downright ashamed of education and educational leaders. And I can almost not talk about it. I just can't. I can't believe it.
It's alarming.
It is alarming, especially because my work in schools, when I really, a lot of what I did was teach teachers and help equip teachers to become better teachers. And I had a huge emphasis on classroom community and bringing kids together, right? And there's everything about masks inhibits learning, repels students from one another. I mean, it violates my conscience
and it's obvious.
In sense of decency in
It's
every way.
obvious.
Exactly. And if school's not safer when you're masked, it's either safe or it's not safe, really, in a lot of ways. So I've always been against it. But in Illinois, what I've tried to frame it as, because I think from a school point of view, this is what it is. It's a dress code issue, right? It's a dress code because you are making kids wear something. So any rule you have about what students can wear or look like in school, or how they can present themselves.
You can't wear a Let's Go Brandon.
Yeah, right. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a medical device or whatever else you want to call it. It's a dress code issue. And it's interesting because most schools, and you raised this, or I think you raised this point earlier or mentioned this, that, most schools do have like a no hats rule. Well, why? Well, a lot of schools will justify that by saying, because it's a distraction, right, to the educational process, but it interferes with identity. Or for Halloween costumes, most schools will say you can't wear a mask. Why? Because it's a safety issue. Yeah. So, we have religious objections to dress code rules in Illinois under the state statute. So I think
how's that working for masks?
Well, I successfully made the argument with my son's private school. He hasn't had to wear one all year. And I'm still fighting the public school for my daughter. But
real quick, do they make do they make your boy sit like outside the class?
No, none of that. But it is a private school. And my daughter, we don't send her to school with a mask. They give her one every day. So the school literally, you could say forces her, because if she doesn't put it on, she has to go to the office, and she knows she can reject it. She knows, but she wants to be in school, right? She wants to be with her
That's
friends. So, I think for me, that's why it ultimately has to be like legislated or not issued by fiat either way. But I agree with you. I think masking, forget the kids can't breathe, and forget the oxygen issue for a second. From a social
forget the bacteria petri dish over the breathe holes.
Well, because that's really what the American Academy of Pediatrics is speaking to, right? Like, where are our professional organizations?
They strip those pages off their website, by the way. You know that.
But the social psychological impacts, nobody wants to talk about. And you can't tell me that there aren't researchers
there are.
There are. We know there are.
They did this in Japan. They had this issue in Japan, right? Yep. So a lot of the viewers might not know. You probably know this, but part of the reason masks. By the way, this is racist as can be, right? But like part of the reason that people wanted masks, right? Back when Fauci was saying masks don't work, which by the way was right. And then part of the reason why masking, settled in, was because Asian people do it.
Sure.
Right? Like, I can't tell you how many people I heard that were like, well, they're pretty smart over there. And I'm like, wait, okay. But the fact is that Japan actually had a national problem with masking prior to this. And what had happened was they had found out that surgical masks do provide some relief from seasonal allergies, right? And not to go too much into particle physics here, but like pollen molecules are like blimps, you're right, compared to BBs for coronavirus. But anyway, the masks do block some, large pollen particles, right? And so people were seeing some relief during severe allergy season, especially in the city where, as if you're not exposed to, allergens and pollen, your body doesn't, your body overreacts to. That's where a lot of, problems like that come from. So what happened is that the word got around, people were buying surgical masks just for that season, but people were getting addicted to them. And they were getting addicted to them for exactly the reasons you're pointing out, psychological reasons, anonymity. A lot of women were putting them on when they woke up in the morning and either were late or just didn't feel like putting on makeup. So they put a mask over their face. And it was becoming a problem. And it was causing social issues. And I don't know how much you know about Japan, but they have a lot of social isolation issues anyway. And so this was well known, right? They've already, gone down that rabbit hole to a large degree with these psychological downsides of masks. And we just completely forgot about them, conveniently when this all came about.
Yeah, agreed. I actually have a long thread on this. I'll try to repost it today, or retweet it. I retweet it every once in a while and I add to it. But on this mask dependency, sometimes I call it, or they call it mask dependency or mask addiction in Japan. When I get people on Twitter like, people aren't addicted to masks, I'm like, okay, mask attachment. And I have in the thread some reports from, not only media, like mainstream media, it's kind of covered this issue here a little bit. When we've kind of had some, like last May 2021, like when there was okay, you can take off your mask if you're vaccinated. There were a series of kind of news reports that would ask people if they're going to take off their masks. And it was interesting to hear people's responses, but particularly parents of girls on social media will tell me, my daughter's wearing her mask at home. My son won't leave the house without his mask. I mean, that is a sign of disordered thinking. I'm not saying the person has a problem that needs to be medicated, but this is what we're doing. And I don't know, back to the school boards for a second. I've said this to some school board members in Chicagoland, if I were you, I'd be worried about getting sued personally, not too many years from now, for over psychological problems that will be recognized someday, right? I mean, you can picture billboards call 1-800, whatever lawyer, and if your child was forcibly masked, or you were as a child, right? There may be damages in the future for the harms.
To that point, once we realized that our school board and our local officials did not even want to have a discussion with us on the science of the data, what we started doing, and we encouraged our local parents, and a lot of people have done this, is literally, publicly documented, send the school board proof and outline and say, look, these things cause damage. You're damaging our kids. This is your warning. And, these things are, public record when they go to your school board administration. Excuse me. And so to your point, this is what we've been planning for. Again, I don't like sue culture. I hate it, actually. I don't like, trial lawyers particularly, but these people, these administrators and these bureaucrats, these people in charge of these decisions, to a large degree, single-handedly force these things onto our kids. It would be very different if they were like, look, we're the local school board. We don't necessarily disagree with you, but we feel our hands are tied by the state. Sure, That's not what they did. They went all in. They were like, no, this works. We're doing this hard. We think that this equals safety. So we're going to do it even more. And we're just, and we provided ample evidence to them of the potential harms. So if there are potential harms, and I agree with you, I think that there are going to be. I think that, you're going to have long-term effects from this, especially little kids. Oh my God.
Well, and I kind of half joke, when this generation of forcibly masked school kids becomes lawyers, they become lawyers and journalists, look out.
Yeah.
right? Like they will.
I was a
remember.
COVID baby. I was a COVID kid.
The mask generation M, I've been calling it, right? Like the mask generation, like they will remember and they will get angry and rightfully. I mean, my daughter's angry about it now. Like,
Again,
you know,
save the
heaven
receipts.
help
And
the
that-
person, you know, if she becomes a lawyer or politician or whatever, like there is going to be payback.
Absolutely.
But, you know, the current leaders at all levels, elected and otherwise, you know, will have to be moved out of power. And then I think and they will be eventually, right? Even if it's only by death, you know, their eventual deaths. But then I think we will start to see, the only word I can think of right now is like, I don't want to say retribution, reparations, like accountability.
Accountability.
Like I think we will see it. Now, in yours and my lifetime, I don't know. But I think it'll happen. I'm hopeful. Again, that's the optimist in me. That's hilarious.
I saw this. So hold on. I got a couple more things to show you.
All right,
I did find this. Let's see this. Here we go. Here's Kerry Mullis on his PCR test from earlier.
I want to ask this to Kerry. How do they misuse PCR to estimate all these supposed free viral RNAs that may or may not be there?
I think misuse PCR is not quite. I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. See, if you can say, if they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. But the real misuse of it is that you don't need to test for HIV. You don't need to test for the other 10,000 retroviruses that are unnamed also in the subject. See, somebody that's got HIV generally is going to have almost anything that you can test for because they have definitely been. HIV is a fairly rare virus. There's only 1 million of us out of 250, 300 million people in America that have that virus. So you have to get around, either your mother had to have it and pass it to you, or you have to really be paying a lot of attention to people that do have it and paying only attention to them and get a pretty good chance of getting it that way. It's hard to get it, but if you have it, there's a good chance you've also got a lot of other ones because you've been in the market for it's been possible for you to get a lot of. To test for that one and say that has any special meaning is what I think is the problem. Not that PCR has been misused. It's like. It's not an estimation. No, it's a really quantitative thing. It tells you something about nature and about what's there, but it allows you to take a very minuscule amount of anything and make it measurable, and then talk about it in meetings and stuff like it is important. See, that's not a misuse. That's just sort of a misinterpretation.
So I always thought that was interesting about, you can tell that's his baby, right? He doesn't want people to say like, it's broken or it's bad. But he's right. It's like, you can magnify up these cycles and you can make a mountain out of a molehill, and our media.
And that's what we've done, right? Isn't that what we've done? We've made something out of nothing. College kids come to mind, right? U of I was testing kids, like all kids last year, twice a week. Right? Like trying to find it. Like, I called it seek and find testing. Right? Absolutely. But to what end? To what end?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think we figured it out. And that's all I'm saying.
If more people agreed with us, right?
Again, I think we're the majority. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah. I do. Cool. There is a shift. I think the OSHA decision helped as well. Right, which it went the way I expected it to go. We can talk about that another time. But it's, I think, just OSHA and the OSHA mandate in particular. Right. CMS is another story. But I think that helped. If that had passed, I think, or stayed, I think there'd be a whole other wave of hysteria. So, or it would have primed.
Oh, that would have been terrible, honestly.
Really terrible. So.
Well, All right. Well, we've gone an hour and 20 minutes.
Wow.
And we didn't really even interview each other. I guess we could do that.
No, we didn't. We have to do that another time. Get more of each other's stories and background, and how we came to Twitter and all that. That'll be fun to. Wait, what was your? I was going to ask you one more thing. What was your name? You told me before, because I think you and I interacted when you were.
Yeah.
I know, but what was the handle?
I'm not even gonna say.
Oh my god.
Only thing I'll say is I was a huge chicken.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a little bit of a hint.
But
I don't think anybody could find it anymore. And you know what I found? You know what I found? Is I found that I had a lot of freedom. Again, I started that account in like January of 2020 because I saw the videos early out of China, and like I saw them on Christmas Eve. I was like, these people were falling over. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And so I was on Twitter very early, and I got up to about 2,500 followers. I was doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that I was being more of an asshole than I wanted to be. And not a lot. I mean, I'm not like super trolly guy, even anonymous, but that was one reason. And then once I'd sort of come out on Facebook, you know, all the people I kind of would care about. And again, I don't really care because I want to say what I think is the truth. You know what I mean? Like, but I'd already pissed off, right, the people I was going to piss off, right? So I was like, I don't know why I'm anonymous anymore on Twitter. And so like in the middle of the summer, I deleted that account and I went over to me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right. You can tell me offline what your name was.
No, I don't think. Again, I just.
Did you archive the account, by the way? You know, you can or you can download all of the tweets from
I didn't.
It.
Again, I just was like, you know, it was
just for yourself, right?
Yeah,
just for yourself. Like,
really,
what was I thinking back then?
You know, but most of the stuff I put on Twitter, I was putting on Facebook at that point.
Oh,
I was
that's right. You're on Facebook.
I was well. I'm not very much anymore, and I wasn't prior to COVID. Honestly, I wasn't a big Facebook. I would, you know, post pictures of the kids or something. But when, you know, February rolled in, February 2020, Facebook. I don't know if I don't even know if you're on. But
no, I retired in 2008. I was only
I didn't think that you were, but my Facebook blew up. I mean, that's where the discussion was taking place, right? And on a community level, and also sort of on a, you know, a friend level, and it was very interesting. It was very interesting, and I actually archived all of that.
Oh, okay, right. So you have some record of your thinking.
Oh, totally.
That time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I kind of actually earlier this year, I did this thing on YouTube where I was going back on the day. I started in like early March of this past year, and I was going back 1 year ago. I call it the COVID time machine. And I was literally like going through my Facebook, and I was going through my friends' comments and shit. And I ended up just kind of petered out just because it was so laborious.
Yeah.
You know, but it was really interesting to see all the comments and the posts and the news stories, and to see it was very interesting. I saved it all. I really did.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that is different about this pandemic, or pandemic response, as I call it, is like there is going to be, I mean, assuming it all doesn't get deleted, right, by big tech or something, but there is a record. I mean, the record of all of this is so rich. And with the photos, right? Like all of the documentation. I joke about the future exhibit at the Smithsonian, right? About this, what I think will come to be called, like, in part, a mass hysteria event. So there's just so much documentation. The hard part for historians in the future will be, you know, just curating and going through all of it, right? Amazing.
Totally. And I'll just leave on this, which is, I actually think that what you just said connects to the idea of an off-ramp. And I think that this is very interesting because everybody, for the most part, has gone on record, right? One way or the other. We didn't have a record like this in Nazi Germany. We didn't have a record like this in Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah, right.
The people, right? So there's thirds, right? There's a third of the people who are the authoritarians that drive this bullshit. There's a third of the people, which is us, that are like, what the hell are you doing? No.
Mhm.
And then there's that middle third, right?
The middle.
And that middle third was on the side of the authoritarians on lockdown, right? And it's always about shifting that third before it gets too bad, right? They didn't shift that third in time for Nazi Germany. And, you know, Salem, Massachusetts, they just, you know, eventually just petered out, you know, but like they finally came to their senses. But what you didn't have in Salem, Massachusetts was a public record of, you know, Jessica Smith and Eric Johnson, you know, were like, dunk them, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you know, nobody went
Right.
on the record like that. And so when
Right.
it did shift, though, that middle third had the luxury of disappearing into anonymity.
Sure.
Right. And
Sure.
and the same thing actually did happen in Nazi Germany. Like there were, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of people that survived the war, right? That were German citizens. And, you know, after World War II, you know, those people were like, yeah, I didn't do that.
Yeah, there's not
You know,
necessarily
they
a
were just
record,
like
a robust record of how
not
all those
super
people
robust.
acted. I mean, there's
Exactly.
their memories, but yeah,
Yeah. And
not
you
in
know,
time, not
absolutely.
real time record,
And
right?
those people were out there, you know, get the
Yeah.
dude or whatever, you know, like those people were, I mean, maybe they weren't like, you know, Nazi soldiers, but they were absolutely driving it. They were perpetuating it. They were allowing it to happen. And so in COVID mania, you have the Dings and the Wins of the world, right? And the Yammies and these people that have been driving this stuff. And these people are on the record with
Yeah.
very, very, very wrong ideas and wrong recommendations that are, you know, provably disastrous.
Yeah, and you know,
And
I think except when we're talking about like Fauci, okay, or somebody like that, you know, I think that we Americans in general are very forgiving. And I think if somebody like Eric Ding, okay, who I don't follow him at all, but Chief Panic Pusher.
neither do I.
But like when people like kind of confess and say, I was wrong and I'm
There you go.
sorry, you know, like I think Americans really respond to that. I mean, even that Boris Johnson announcement, you know, like that guy's been a hypocrite. You know, he's harmed a lot of people, but like in the
Yep.
moment, it just feels like such a relief. And then yeah, accountability can come, but I think Americans were like, okay, just admit that you're wrong and move on, and we can forgive you, right? Right?
For I agree with you. For
That's
most,
my glass half full perspective.
for some, yeah, I think the normies, especially, they can say, oh, well, you know, we listen to public health, but you know, I don't know if I don't know. We'll see, man. I think that some of these people caused, you know, a whole lot of damage that they didn't have to cause. And not only did they not have to, they were warned. You know what I mean? Like we've told them,
Right.
and they didn't listen. Like you know what I mean? There's it's tough. It's tough.
It is. I know that's a whole other topic. We could do a whole episode just on that and highlighting people.
Yes, we should.
Yeah, we should. Well, this has been really fun. Our first foray.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo.
Awesome.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. You too.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.